Mike, can you talk?
Where'd your volume go there, Bo?
You can't hear me?
Barely.
Why is my volume down?
Yeah, it
Is it?
definitely got low.
Is it still low? Is that better?
Well, it's
Oh,
obviously a little
damn! I gotta
better
be able
when
to
you lean
talk.
close.
I gotta be
But
able to
when you
talk.
were leaning as close as you were, it was as loud as it was prior.
Oh, weird. All right, how about now?
Better.
Better? Okay. Can you hear me
You
typing?
fixed it.
Can you hear me typing?
Yeah.
Damn, I can't even touch my keyboard. What a fucking pain in the ass. All right. Because I have to click while I'm doing this. All right.
There's absolutely no way to mute your audio temporarily to the computer.
No.
Like I know you record your
I'll
audio
mute the whole
separately.
audio chain. We're all recorded on the same chain right now.
Same. We're off the chain.
Yeah. It's like I can stop the typing as much, but like I still need to click every now and then.
Oh, I just meant,
Okay.
is there like a mute button like I have on my mic? If there's a way you could simulate that on your end.
No. All right.
Just do this and type with one hand.
That doesn't work on my mic. My mic is fucking awesome. All right.
Yeah, Mike.
All right, we are live, so let us go live. Also, I just posted this week's episode, so retweet it.
What
Do
was
you
the
guys think
topic?
that the mic was named after a guy named Mike? He's like, hey guys, check out this thing I made. I'm gonna call it a mic. It records voices.
I've got a response to that.
Someone's like, and someone's like, Mike, that sounds lame. He's like, all right, I'll call it a microphone, and then no one will know it was named after me. But they'll all short form it as Mike.
Or
right.
phone.
Good, bad, or bullshit. Who did you decide who's starting?
Yeah, me.
All right.
Let's record.
Good, bad, or bullshit. Episode 152 begins recording in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello, greetings. Welcome to another episode of the Good, Bad, or Bullshit podcast, where you're joining us for a topic selected at random, followed by some unrehearsed conversation, and then the icing on the cake, a quality review provided by each of our three hosts, and you, if you choose to write in and tell us your own thoughts. And those three hosts are myself, Mike Hodgins, and Mr. Bo Schwartz. Hello, Bo.
Hi there, Mike. How are you today?
I'm well. And Mr. Crofton Steers.
Ahoy, hoy.
Ahoy to you as well. How you fellas doing this fine spring day? It's like warm out.
It's a better day. I got some sleep last night, so I'm actually feeling spry.
Sleep's important.
It's a good day. I'm old and I got allergies and my back hurts, but my back feels better and I took a pill for my allergies. So, not bad.
Sound like an old person.
Are the pills like making you constipated or anything? Because
Not yet.
those conversations generally ensue when you're like, I take this pill, but that pill takes for that pill, and now
They
I can't
do
go
when
poop.
talking to
That's
Bo
something
Schwartz.
my dad has exactly said. He takes pills and they always make him constipated for something.
I know. They make you constipated or they make you insane. You
I
have
was listening to this radio. You were talking about sleep. You got some sleep, Bo. And I always think of you as someone who's chronically sleep deprived.
well, that's why I said it.
And it was what was her name? Ariana Huffington. I don't know why she's like a sleep crusader, and she was talking about how it's like this epidemic of our time that people are chronically sleep deprived, and how it used to it's like this note of pride. People say like, oh yeah, I go on 6 hours a night or 5 hours a night because you're working and you're busy and you're whatever, and how it's basically just like kills people and makes them dumber. And she said she thought that Donald Trump is a prime example of someone who suffers from chronic sleep deprivation. And I was like,
Really?
that's interesting. And he prides himself. He says, I sleep 4 hours or 4.5 hours a night. And I'm like, huh.
Well, he's also at that age. I would point out that the late 90s, early 2000s James Bond movie Die Another Day with Pierce Brosnan, the villain had developed some sort of mask that he put his head in that allowed him. It took 15 minutes and it gave him like 8 hours sleep. So he effectively never needed to sleep. And because of that became super rich and managed to do all this crazy stuff because he had those extra hours every day. It
Like
was not
many things in the James Bond saga, it may be stretching the truth a tad.
a little bit, but it made me think about, if you could take let's just say, you had a couple of pills that you could take, not speed, but like a couple of pills, and they just replicated 8 hours of sleep. And there was really nothing wrong with them, whatever. It was just the pills. So instead of sleeping, you could just take the pills. Would you take the pills, or would you go to sleep?
Well, I mean, it's like, you're talking about a hypothetical thing that has all
Yeah,
kinds
yeah.
of problems with it.
It has no problems with it. I'm telling you, the pills have no side effects. They're perfect.
It's a
It's
fact.
like you could just take the pills, or you could
It's a
sleep.
what if question.
Yeah, well, in that what if scenario, I'm also Superman and I fly around the sun. So yeah, I would take the
No,
pill.
you're
because
adding
I like
stuff to
spend
my
more time-
scenario. You're adding stuff to my scenario. See, I would take the pills sometimes, but a lot of times I would still sleep because I actually enjoy sleeping. I enjoy the dreaming and the comfort and all that sort of
if
stuff.
there's
I
no
like
side
that.
effects, give me the pills, because then I can go on a 87-hour World of Warcraft bender.
Oh no, I know for sure.
right?
For Bo, I feel like he would be a pill guy until one day he'd just go off the pills and sleep for like 500 hours.
Wait, you said there's no side effects to it.
No,
They shouldn't
there
have
isn't.
to sleep after the end.
But see, in reality, it's funny that you mentioned the pills because they were also talking about what is it? What's it called? It's a sleep aid pill. Starts with an A. We don't get them advertised to us in Canada, but it's a big.
Adderall.
I want to say Aleve, but it's definitely not Aleve because that's a painkiller.
Aspirin.
Ambien. And they
Is it Ambien?
they're talking about Ambien, and they talk about the side effects of Ambien, which are things like that sound crazy, where it's like you take Ambien, and then it's like you may not remember things that you did once you take Ambien, like operating a motor vehicle, or eating food, or sleepwalking, or doing any number of things that you like having sex while you're asleep. And I'm like, that seems bad for many reasons, but people are like, I can't sleep, I'll take this pill, and then they go and do stuff and they're unconscious. I'm like,
I will say that I like electronica music, but ambient's my favorite genre.
They're just covering their bases for insurance reasons, but probably most of the time it works fine.
Well, they played this clip of this I can't remember her name, who was on Letterman show, and she was talking about how she always takes Ambien, and she was like telling all these crazy stories. She takes the Ambien, I'm out, and then I wake up and there's like a video on my phone I took, and I've changed all my clothes and stuff like that. I'm like,
This is like the Mike Hodgins hour of not remembering where things are from in his references. He's like, there was some lady on Letterman. She took some drug. I think it started with an A. Is it Ambien?
The name of it, and I told you it was Ariana Huffington, and it was on the CBC. So you want to go listen to them, and you'll find it.
Wait, this lady on Letterman was Ariana Huffington taking Ambien?
Ariana Huffington was the one talking about sleep on the CBC.
I'm confused.
Let's do a random topic.
I think after a long analysis, Mike has been shilling for CBC. Somehow, somebody at CBC is so bad at their job that their idea of influencer outreach is to pay Michael to talk about CBC.
I would also say that anyone who works for a public broadcaster trying to be like, we need to increase our advertising is like, you're not doing it right. It's a public broadcasting.
Yeah.
Man, I really need an Ambien.
Yeah,
Okay.
we should give you one on the show, and then you wouldn't have to listen to me, and then you at the end of it you just have a podcast recorded.
And then I'd be able to listen to the episode afterwards, and it would be refreshingly new, and I would still make good points.
Exactly.
Okay. Mike.
I think the machine's ready. I'm gonna pull the thing, get it started.
If you're good, I think we're primed here.
Do you remember what the thing's called, Mike? It's a random topic.
Ugh,
I love that sound. It's the best sound in podcasting, folks.
got a ring to it. Okay, the topic today is skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers.
The very tall buildings.
So this on the surface feels like a benign topic. Yeah, you walk around a city, you see a skyscraper, you go, I don't give a shit, and then you just go on with your life. So
all right, what's your verdict?
Let's start somewhere, because skyscrapers are a thing in the world and they are all over the place. So I think they're important.
Are they all over the place? How many stories before you're considered a skyscraper?
I think you say 10 stories.
10 stories.
Because I think the term skyscraper is an old one.
Right.
So like 10 stories is, it's a tall building. I would even probably say something like 6 or 8 is getting, it's a tall building.
If I had a time machine, I'd want to go back and get somebody who would coin a term like that from whatever age they started coining terms like that and show them our buildings and see what they'd say.
Well, that's it. I'm sure also saying 10 stories, anyone who lives in like a city like New York or like Toronto even who of course we don't have any listeners in those cities, but if we did, they'd be like, this guy's an idiot. That's like a shit on a 10-story building.
Yeah, generally skyscrapers I associate with like, 20
90.
stories. Yeah, 20
20.
no, 20
Sound
plus.
like a country bumpkin.
Starting at 20. Shut your hole. So the thing is with skyscrapers is that they're generally related to increasing density in a certain area. Now, it could be density for residences, could be density for businesses, commerce. Generally happens in the downtown core of cities, not always, but often. But one thing I find interesting is like they're sort of the product of the need to build upwards. So Wellington, New Zealand, the capital of New Zealand, which is not by any stretch of the imagination a big city. It's like, I want to say it's like 115,000 or something like that. It's not a huge city. It's definitely not as big as Auckland on their biggest city, their Tirana, on the other end of the North Island, but it has pretty much as many skyscrapers. And the reason is it's built on a bay with sort of mountains surrounding it. And there are sort of suburbs that you can get to by driving outside of the bay, but they essentially need to maximize the space. And at a certain point, ran out of real estate and had to build upwards. So I think Hong Kong is somewhat in that same boat.
I've been to Hong Kong, and when I was
all right, fine.
Well, you brought it up. When I was a kid, I loved pictures of Hong Kong, because it's this vertical city, same thing. It's an island, and then there's peninsula, and it's just like there's like whatever 7 million people there or something, and they build up, and it is like that's an interesting one because it's like you go there and it's like everything's like 80 stories or whatever, but then you'll see things like people like stick this like bamboo poles at the window to dry their clothes and stuff like that because it's maybe not convenient for a lot of other things like living, in some ways to be like, if you're on story 35, it's not always convenient to like jaunt out to the store to get something. Like everything has to be planned around elevators, like I get how it's like you have a lot of people living in like a small area, you have no place to go but up. Makes total sense. But like, I guess I have to bring up if you're living in one, maybe not working or living in one, is this at all a natural way to live? Like stacked up like that?
I don't know. I've been an apartment dweller, although I don't live in a big one now. It's just 2-story building.
But you lived in a pretty big apartment.
It's kind of cool. I will say waiting for the elevator kind of sucks, and not having recourse when the elevator goes down, i.e. billions of stairs to climb up, also does suck. So if it's a well-planned building, though, you probably have redundancy and you've got the elevator, so it's less of an issue. And oftentimes you have convenience on the bottom floor in the form of, pharmacies are very local. And I don't know, I have to imagine the really tall buildings, maybe there's even a store like in the middle. Maybe.
Some of them do have that.
The giant ones might have like a middle mall area. The really big ones.
I want to throw this question out to Mike because he has told me about the merits and value of densifying the urban core in particular, because I live in sort of like an urban village type area, and every once in a while an infill's coming in and turning one house into 2 houses and all this, and skyscrapers just end up being the result of a need to densify. Sometimes not, sometimes they're just money grabs or whatever, and we talked about that a little bit in the condominium episode, but I guess my question would be, like if the world population just keeps growing, and like we have these cities and we need to find places for people to live, does it not make sense to build upwards? Like what else would we do?
I mean,
kill people to make less people? Like I
know we could build more cars. There aren't enough cars in the world right now.
Let the poor
skyscrapers or mass holocaust.
No, but I mean, it's like let the poor starve. I mean, like you have it once you have a population issue, you have too many people. It's like for them to be able to have proper clean housing and not just piled on top of each other in giant bunches of humanity. Isn't skyscrapers just the natural conclusion that you just build up in an organized fashion?
It is like it. I guess it depends what you're trying to like achieve, and if it's just like housing people, like I mean, I don't know what the answer to I don't know quite what your question was. Like, there's more people. Should you not build a skyscraper? Like, yes, sure. It's a good way to house more people in a small geographic
You
area.
could build a ground
What's the
scraper.
alternative?
Ground scraper, like a giant cavern.
And they're looking at sort of things like that in New York and Manhattan right now, building in the old subway tunnels and trying to build down. There's this crazy design of like sinking Central Park and then having like on the inside like all these sort of condos around the rim of the Central Park's
That
lower.
sounds insane.
Well, there's the
I know.
underground mall in Montreal. I mean, it's a similar concept, but just deeper, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like part of the problem with some of these things is like a lot of skyscrapers, and this probably is not all of them, but a lot of them are like not efficient buildings at all. Like, so they cost a ton to heat and a ton to cool, much more so than an equivalent well-built sort of single-family house. I mean, could you build one that is, well, I'm sure you could. I don't know if the cost becomes exorbitant, but it's like they're just a lot of them are built, yeah, to house people, but not necessarily well, in the sense that like it's wasting a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy intensive material like concrete and things like and steel to build these types of building, whereas you could use a renewable resource like wood to build a house, but you can't build a skyscraper out of wood, or you would be stupid if you did so. Like,
Yeah.
it's a wood, 130 stories of wood. You can't do it. So you have to use energy intensive materials and very extractive materials. Like, you have to increase, it's mining. The energy used to make concrete, it's a ton, and processing steel and metal like that goes into these buildings. It's all like damaging stuff. And not to say that the lumber industry is like wonderful, but at least it is a renewable industry. You can plant more trees, you can manage forests, whatever. It's got its problems too.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree. Like, how do you deal with density? Yes, like build buildings that hold more people, sure, in lesser spaces. I mean, I think that's kind of a side question, in the sense that I'd be like, maybe we shouldn't have so many mega cities. Maybe people should move to other smaller cities. But
if you don't build up, then I think the point Crofton's trying to make, besides the Holocaust and killing people, which I think was more on the jokey side,
yeah, his main
was
point.
that you have to build laterally, basically. Like, you have, like, if there is a density of people that just insist on being on one part of the earth because of business and survival or whatever. If you don't build up and you don't build down, you gotta build widthwise, and doesn't that increase our dependence on cars and all those modern conveniences and travel time? Like, you're still draining the resources around. Like, you have to have water pipes and sewage, and those houses still need to be cooled and heated.
Yeah, like like that's totally agree. And we talked about suburbs on this very show a long time ago. It was one of our early things about the suburbs, which are precisely that, right? Building outwards. And we all agreed that they were. Well, I'm going to say. I was going to say bad. I'm like, maybe someone said bullshit. We definitely did not say
they're
suburbs.
definitely lame. The thing is, like, skyscrapers are not lame. Like, if you live or work in a skyscraper,
yes,
it's not lame. But if you work, I mean, if you work in the suburbs, if you live in the suburbs, it's lame. Like, there's no way to coolify either of these. Like,
well, I was gonna say, Bo, and that was like, I had that on the tip of my tongue as well when you were talking about like it being suburbs being lame. I was thinking that there's a status associated with skyscrapers. Like, it feels like they symbolize success. And like, when Donald Trump is always trying to pitch this idea of him as like a successful businessman, it's because he has these giant skyscrapers in multiple cities with his name plastered at the top, right? And that there's something that like, when you think of New York, you think of the skyline. You think the skyline of these cities, and the ones that are the most iconic, or often tend to be, are the ones with skyscrapers. And maybe it just symbolizes that this is a destination, that lots of people want to live here. So many people want to live here that we have to build up. So that's why they symbolize success. I don't really know.
But that raises another interesting point about, like, when we talk about like the real skyscrapers. Like, I mean, if we're just saying, okay, any building above 10 or 20 stories. That's a lot of buildings, and you can make. But when you think of skyscraper, like a real skyscrapers, you think of like the Sears Tower, or like the Empire State Building, or like in Dubai, whatever that building's called, or the towers in Kuala Lumpur. Like there's some giant, and they're built just for that. They become the icons of a skyline, right? And those ones are usually built for that purpose. Like it's not a necessity to build a 100-story building. Like there's never like everyone needs a place to live, and it needs to be in this block 100 stories up. Like that's just not true. Like if you were to build 10 buildings at 20 stories, you could where there's ones that are currently 2 or 3 or parking lots or something like that, you could meet those density needs. And then you just wonder, like, is it insane to have a building that big that consumes that much energy, that has like these giant elevators? It does seem like it's really cool. Like when you go up a tall building like the CN Tower, I don't think you technically call that a skyscraper. It's some kind of something else. But when you go up it, you're like, wow, this is cool. And then they become like a tourist attraction.
I think it's a tower.
The CN, it's a CN Tower. No, but I think there's actually a term for it. It's like it's always referred to as a tall freestanding structure, which is different than a skyscraper or a tall building.
I think it's been passed by like that building that Tom Cruise scaled in Dubai.
Yeah, the Dubai one, but I think
the Burj Khalifa something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
That building is crazy.
But see, that's like Dubai is, when you brought it up, it made me think Dubai is like a perfect example of like the skyscraper status and the idea of like building upwards for no reason other than to be like, look how loaded we are. Let's have the tallest building imaginable.
It's also a giant FU to nature, because we traditionally have buildings close to the ground because it's safe. And the higher we build up, the more we tempt fate. And I know we had a really cool article. There was one time I was on Current Geek, and we talked about these large buildings actually sway in the wind. These giant skyscrapers.
They're meant to, yeah.
They're not designed like we have to make this as rigid as possible. They're actually designed to withstand a high degree of winds, which means they actually sway with the wind, the high velocity wind somewhat. Some of them even having giant skyscraper ball, somewhere in the middle to help maintain like a 780 ton weight in the middle to help keep it stable and to when it leans one way, the ball leans the other way, kind of, so it helps stabilize it. It's insane. It's there, like the biggest skyscrapers. Forget scaling it. Building the damn thing is actually a feat of humanity.
And that's what's kind of insane. Like right now, I'm in the process of renovating a house, and I basically could have built a new one for the amount of work I'm doing. And that's an interesting thing to be like. You can build a house. Like you could learn how. Any one of you guys, maybe not Crofton. No, I think even Crofton, if he put his mind to it, could go and build a house. It's not like. And you're kind of allowed to. You could never build a skyscraper. I could be like, you know what? I really want to build. I want to be Dubai. It's my new personal goal. It's just like happen. You need like $1 billion, like massive resources. Like it's industrial scale building, whereas houses are human scale building. Mm-hmm. And again, we live in an industrial age, and we need those things so that they have their purpose, but. It can, it comes back to that kind of thing is being iconic, or like, look what we can do as human beings, because it cannot be done by anything other than a large group in a complex society, which is neat. It's kind of like showing where we are as a civilization. Look what we can do, and that's.
In the end game of Civilization, the video game, when you're near the end, that's when you get skyscrapers.
The ziggurats?
I don't know. I never got that far.
It was SimCity. I'm thinking of like SimCity in like 2000 and something.
You get
these things called ziggurats. They were like the future of things.
What if the future of skyscrapers is one day we have one that's so tall that you can live in the penthouse in space? That they're so tall that they tip out into space, and you're a space.
It's funny that you say that, because apparently there are people who theorize about making space elevators as an actual effective way to get stuff into orbit. And I'm like, that sounds insane, but
we build giant. I mean, we're working our way higher and higher,
Yeah,
And
it's pretty interesting.
things that
But
seemed impossible 100 years ago, we have now. So you kind of want to keep that door open a little bit, you know? Maybe.
and it's funny because like in terms of this thing, like back to it being like it's like a privilege, and it's interesting to think about tall buildings like this because when you think of like projects in dense cities, they're often tall buildings, like very basic. But also, if you think of like a penthouse in a big, in a big building in a downtown core of a big city, you're talking like millions of dollars, like much more than it would cost you to buy a mansion in a lot of cases. So they're kind of like this mix of elitist and for everyone, depending on which way you sway with them. And I think a lot of place like there was a time where they built a lot of these sort of like big apartment blocks and they're very simple. A lot of people could live in them and maybe it was affordable or whatever. But now because of the condo sort of boom, which you also talked about, like in our town, there's a building going up and I find it so funny that it's called the Icon. Like that's what it's called itself, the Icon. And it's going to be the tallest building in Ottawa. There's a giant swank condo. And again, it's that whole thing of like, oh, look where I live. Like I'm in a tall building where it's the Icon. And it's just it's like proving a point, and it's becoming more like I live in the tall building. It's funny to think about that term, the ivory tower, when people are like all elite or above others. There always was this idea that the rich like a-hole lives up in the tower
Well,
because that's where
yeah, because when you live on the second floor of a tower, and I've lived in an apartment building, so people throw their cigarette butts down. You get to see them falling down. Like the shit does roll downhill.
the pigeons
The
attack
pigeons. I was on the floor. You should have seen my balcony at that apartment at Fobo. It was covered in pigeon shit. Couldn't get rid of it. I just feel like I'm gonna die 10 years younger because of all the pigeon particulate I've inhaled over the years on that damn balcony.
And in cities like New York, they're all like that, right? Like if you want to live somewhere, you're living in a skyscraper. If you want to live on Manhattan, you're pretty much going to be in one, and so you want to be closer to the top and that culture just moves with the where New York goes, so goes the world, and. I will say, like, as an adult, I have a better appreciation of why Spider-Man was based in New York, because honestly, he could not live in our city. Like it would be the most boring. He would be stopping crime in like 2 square blocks where he's like, oh, sweet, here's a skyscraper. Okay. Oh, now it's a 2-story building, like 2 stories for the next foreseeable future.
Well, you should just take public transport like everyone else.
Yeah, he's like, I'm just gonna ride on top of the buses. At one point, like when I was a kid, they gave away like this. There was this series of Spider-Man Goes to Canada where they gave, and anyway, it was a free comic that taught you lessons. It was kind of lame, but it was free. And he goes to Charlottetown, PEI.
Oh.
And I'm like, wow, that would really suck for Spider-Man. Like, I cannot think of a worse place.
Hey, there's the church steeple. I better swing off it.
Yeah, there's nothing else. But yeah, all this to say, I don't have much left to say about skyscrapers.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about the living situation, but we all work in buildings. I mean, Mike, do you think it's better for businesses to be organized in such a way that everyone's together? Definitely for the business, it makes sense because people are closer and it's more convenient. But
I feel like I'm the de facto expert on skyscrapers.
Well,
I don't know
you work in the tallest building. I did work in like a 20 to 30
Crofton works in a
building,
much taller building than I worked in.
Oh, that's true, actually. Yeah.
Worked in
so
tall.
On the 19th floor for a long time,
I mean,
which is incidentally the tallest, currently the tallest building or second tallest in the National Capital Region.
Not until the Icon.
but it is a good. Bo's point is well made in that like we've been talking about skyscrapers as residences, and they often serve more as commercial buildings, especially where we live. And they have allowed employees to work together, and especially we're in the capital of our country, so there's a lot of government jobs, and a lot of employees need to work together. Now, I think we've reached the point now with streaming video and accessibility of computers and internet that we can start working from home a lot easier than we used to be able to. So I feel like there's almost a move away from these giant skyscrapers, and maybe more maybe in 10 years, people will be all working out of their homes and essentially just coming into a communal office to attend meetings or to do a couple of things a few times a month, right? That's already happening some places. So, but I do think that in the late part of the 20th century, the skyscraper was where big businesses with hundreds and thousands of people, that's where they had to be based and where they got stuff done. And it served a purpose at a certain point in time. I'm not sure commercially or in the world of industry, if we're moving away from that, if it still serves that purpose.
Well, Donald Trump is still a factor, and if there's
Yeah,
ever
build
a
this,
monument to ego as the
this big
Trump
foul.
Tower, and he's not the only one that wants a tower in his name or a building in
But
his name.
it's funny because Crofton, you basically meant when Bo asked that question, I was going to give almost the exact same answer, which I think is interesting, and it begs the question a little bit: are these? I think they serve their purpose. They have this historical precedent of being needed in a central place and limited resources. You got to go up, blah blah blah. But the whole internet revolution, or part of it, is supposed to be the interconnectivity of work, of life, whatever. And there's a culture shift that's currently happening. It's a bit slow, but yeah, it's like are do we need these things anymore? Like, being that they are intensely energy intensive to build, very costly, drive up the price of real estate where they are, like just to get people to get on a bus or a car to go to that place. Whereas maybe it's just like, is the skyscraper going to be a thing of the past because of technology that just allows us to work and communicate seamlessly from wherever?
the
Is that
commercial the commercial skyscraper, I think, see, like, going back to my analogy earlier, and this is going back to the residences, like, I know we're a long way from that. We have, from this hypothetical that I'm about to drop, like, we have tons of land out there with that is empty, or the Canadian North, most of Canada lives along the border to the south. But let's just say, for instance, the world, the entire globe, was just completely saturated with people. Like, just we've
like Coruscant?
yes, exactly. Like, what if we be, because then at one point what happens, it feels like you've got to build up and you become Coruscant. I think that's what happens, because I think, yes, right now commercial skyscrapers might not be in need as much anymore, but I feel like the Earth's population keeps growing, and the need for densification is going to keep growing. And then at one point in the science fiction future, skyscrapers will be the way things are done, and you see that in a lot of sci-fi. What was that one recently? Elysium, I think it was, where like all the rich live out off world and like all the poor live in these essentially junkyard skyscrapers on Earth, because it's just reached
It's I
that
mean
point.
it's interesting, and there's like a lot of things that go, like, because that factor of like, as population increases, we have to density. You can follow this natural progression to the skyscrapers everywhere. Like, the major factor with that, and as much as science fiction kind of like figures out technologies to do away with them, what essentially you're trading off, like that scenario involves the destruction of all life. Like if you were to have that many people, like, and we needed that much place to live, like, our ecosystems would collapse, the food systems would collapse, the climate would go completely bonkers, which it's already starting. We're seeing the seeds of those things. It's like, we cannot handle a planet of skyscrapers. Like, and any technology that maybe imagines that we can is technologies that do not exist now. And I think it was pretty interesting because you brought up the point of the whole like work, because it's like this paradigm of like, hey, we talked about residential skyscrapers and commercial skyscrapers, but they're kind of like, they're tied together, right? Because it's like why do people want to live in a skyscraper? Because, oh, I need to live downtown. It's like, well, why do you need to live in a big city? It's like, well, because that's where the jobs are. Like, where are the jobs? They're in the skyscrapers downtown, right? And it's like, so like, if you all want to work in Manhattan, there's all these tall buildings, you got to get to work, and you're like, oh, I don't want to be in traffic for an hour living out in the boonies. I got to get in, I get an apartment building. But if the technology does help us in the sense that it can be like, well, now you don't have to be there, you can do your work from wherever, it'd be in some ways a lot less impactful to have people spread a little thinner, with more like greenery, in your life, and trees and things that are living, that are allowed, like that's a whole other point I would bring up about skyscrapers of like you're totally pulled away from the natural world. And I mean, there are a lot of people that say that just looking at a tree is really good for your health. Like it will ease your stress, it will make you feel better. And living in a skyscraper in like a really dense kind of concrete jungle, like it's totally
But
unnatural.
but
Like
but
I
I've
think
got a plastic tree. I've got a plastic tree. You can see it behind me if you're watching the live
it's trying
stream.
to trick your
Does
your
that does
brain.
that does that calm me if I look at
Maybe
it?
it maybe it helps.
Maybe it
Probably
doesn't. Maybe
does.
it has to be a real tree because the smell is important. You know, like
I don't
don't know.
know. I know I like looking at trees, and I think a lot of people like
You
trees.
like
People like
tapping trees
parks,
too.
right? And then in theory, it's like in cities have little parks and stuff like that, and I think most people who live in cities want their parks to stay there because they're important.
Hmm.
But the more you live, the more you have these taller buildings, the less natural space you ever see. I personally don't think that's good. I think the
I
verdict's shifting on this one.
I find that like, and it's interesting hearing Mike, the way Mike's thinking about it, because I echo a lot of his thoughts in that there's going to be a skyscraper essentially built next to my house, and I've been involved in sort of the planning and development of this because they want to go around height permits and build higher than has been previously allowed in the spot. And as much as they're going to make it nice quality building and do all this sort of stuff, remediate toxic land underneath, there's a lot of good to come from it. They're still building a skyscraper. I was looking at shadowing impacts and all sorts of different stuff. And I realized that like I live in a detached house in an urban environment. It's not a super dense and urban environment, but like it's a detached house, and so I almost by the nature of my circumstances hate skyscrapers or dislike them because I see them as sort of the antithesis of like, and Mike's turning it into like living with nature sort of thing. I'm not sure I go to that extent, but I definitely feel like being closer to the ground, having a nice house to yourself feels good. But I also think it's something that like I don't know if it's like an age thing, but as people get older, it feels like they get near my house, and disgruntled with stuff like skyscrapers and like building up, and part of it is like you're less inclined